if Trump were to win and enact those policies, I think we get to the upper range of that, which could be 400,000. So we'll know that obviously by November. Things could drastically change. If the Harris administration wins, then we might undershoot that target. So I think all eyes are going to be what happens with this election. If Harris comes in, it could be, again, underwhelming that number. It could be extremely bearish. And if Trump wins or RFK wins, it would be extremely bullish. So I think somewhere in that 100,000 to 400,000 range, as I know that's a big number, but I think we'll have to wait and see what happens with the election. Longer term, though, I think, I talk about often that, it's very unclear in the short term. It's much clearer when you think about the long term. So I would say that, I think $1 million Bitcoin by 2030 is in play. That's 2 more cycles, basically. We'll finish this cycle plus 1 more 4-year cycle. I think that number's in play, specifically when you look at what's expected to happen with global liquidity and the sensitivity ratio that Bitcoin moves on that global liquidity.
Entrepreneur, investor, and Bitcoin advocate Mark Moss recently discussed how the upcoming election could significantly impact Bitcoin's future value. If Trump wins and enacts his policies, Moss believes Bitcoin could surge to as high as $400,000. Conversely, a victory by the Harris administration might lead to a more moderate rise, or even a potential decline. The election's outcome will be key in shaping Bitcoin's short-term prospects. Looking further ahead, Moss predicts that Bitcoin could reach $1 million by 2030, fueled by global liquidity trends over the next 2 market cycles. While the short-term outlook remains uncertain, Moss remains optimistic about Bitcoin's long-term growth. Stay until the end of the video to hear more insights from Mark Moss on how Bitcoin could eventually hit $1 million per coin.
Stop. You don't have time. Don't miss out this 2025 bull run. Educate yourself first ahead of the crowd. We have created the ultimate step-by-step crypto cheat guide that will guide you this bull run. Unlock the secrets of crypto and make smarter investments today. Now by clicking on the link below to get your exclusive copy just under $10.
Recently just saw Germany sell off, billions of dollars of Bitcoin. It barely moved the price. The Bitcoin market cap is about $1.3 trillion-ish. There's about $30 billion of activity every single day being sold. 30 billion. So that's the liquidity of the market. The 200,000-ish Bitcoin that the government owns is valued at today's price of about 13 billion. So I think, with $30 billion of market activity on a daily basis, I think we could absorb the 13 billion pretty easily. Would it cause some short-term depression in the price? I mean, it would depend on how they sell it, obviously. Most rational sellers don't want to have what we call slippage. So if they want to sell it all, at $66,000 where we're at today, they would try to manage that so they wouldn't move the market down. If they dumped it all in the market, the price is going to go from 66,000 to 65,000 down to, who knows, 60,000, 55,000. And so they're going to have massive slippage. They'd lose a ton of money doing that. Nobody in their right mind would ever do that unless you were openly trying to attack the network. So one, I don't think they would do that unless if they did, they would really prove how hostile they are. Number two, even if they did, it would probably be a pretty short price depression because, like I said, I think the market could just absorb that.
We're still going to stay on price and what we heard from Michael Saylor, because he's gone ultra maxi bullish on Bitcoin. He, of course, is the executive chairman and co-founder of MicroStrategy, which was the first publicly listed company to put Bitcoin on its balance sheet as a reserve asset. And he is saying that Bitcoin's value could surge to $13 million per coin by 2045. And that's an upgrade from his forecast in June for $10 million per Bitcoin by 2045. What do you make of that?
I don't think it was that bullish. I think it might not be bullish enough.
Wow.
So if we break that down, I didn't prepare the talking points, so I don't have the exact amounts in front of me right now. However, if we break it down, he sort of charted out sort of the bear case, the mid case, and the bull case. So he gave sort of 3 price predictions. And basically what he did is he said, hey, look, Bitcoin has averaged a 150% compounded annual growth rate. We don't believe that's going to continue moving forward. So what will it continue moving forward? And that's how he got sort of the 3 cases. Basically, the bear case is that it moves up faster than the S&P 500. I think it moves up at twice the rate. Now, is that reasonable to think that it could move at twice the rate of the S&P 500? Well, pretty much any of the big tech companies do. So, I mean, that's one case. We also know that, as I mentioned earlier about houses and the S&P 500 moving up at the rate of global liquidity. So we know that the S&P 500 basically moves up exactly like the global liquidity. However, gold has a sensitivity ratio of 1.49. So that means gold moves up For every 10% rise in liquidity, gold goes up by 14%. Bitcoin has a 8.95 sensitivity, which means for every 10% rise in liquidity, that Bitcoin goes up by 90%. So for every 10% raise in liquidity, S&P 500 goes up by 10%. But Bitcoin goes up by 90%. So his bear case was that it would just double the performance of the S&P 500, which I think is way too extremely bearish, in my opinion.
And that ties into your whole crash up theory, right? So
then we just predict. I mean, we can look at the Congressional Budget Office. The CBO projects what they think the debt levels and the deficit levels will be by 2050. Saylor, I think said 2045, which is 21 years for the 21 million Bitcoin. But we can just see what the CBO projects for the debt levels and the deficit levels to be by 2050. And if Bitcoin continues to move at a sensitivity ratio, at least of 2 times the S&P 500, right now it's at 9, then we will easily surpass Michael Saylor's numbers. I think it moves even faster than that, but I don't think when you break down the math, it's not that crazy. Now, if you wanted to use that same number, how much are the median US homes in 2045? Right. How much is a gallon of gas in 2045? And a lot of people are going to be very shocked if they do that math. Yeah, I think 2024, the end of this cycle, I think it should be somewhere in the 100 to 150,000 range based off of where we're at. However, if Trump were to win and enact those policies, I think we get to the upper range of that, which could be 400,000. So we'll know that obviously by November. Things could drastically change. If the Harris administration wins, then we might undershoot that target. So I think all eyes are going to be what happens with this election. If Harris comes in, it could be, again, underwhelming that number. It could be extremely bearish. And if Trump wins or RFK wins, it would be extremely bullish. So I think somewhere in that 100,000 to 400,000 range, as I know that's a big number. But I think we'll have to wait and see what happens with the election. Longer term, though, I think, I talk about often that, it's very unclear in the short term. It's much clearer when you think about the long term. So I would say that, I think $1 million Bitcoin by 2030 is in play. That's 2 more cycles, basically. We'll finish this cycle plus 1 more 4-year cycle. I think that number's in play specifically when you look at what's expected to happen with global liquidity and the sensitivity ratio that Bitcoin moves on that global liquidity. I think part of the reason why there's such a big divide in this country, and I hate to use big platitudes and stereotypes, but we have one group of people who just want to live and let live. Let me do me. Let me focus on my family and my business. Let me do me and you do you. You want to be whatever you want to be, like, cool, good luck. But there's another side that wants to tell us what to do. And so we'll never agree. Like, there's no way those two sides can agree. Like, you want to have purple hair and whatever, like, cool for you. And like, I'm going to do this, like, cool for me. And like, go do you, I do me. And like, we can still be friends. But when you want to force your ideology on me, we'll never reconcile that. And so that kind of goes back to what's on the ballot, right? If Trump maybe doesn't understand Bitcoin, but he's for freedom, which is you should be free to save your money in whatever you want. You want to save your money in Beanie Babies or pet rocks? Cool, go for it. I might think that's stupid, and I have the right to say it's stupid, but I shouldn't make it illegal for you to do that. That's Trump's position. But unfortunately, the other side of the aisle is saying, no. You do not have the right to own any assets. You do not have the right to store your wealth in a way that you want. We will tell you. We are the arbiter of truth, and that's what's really at the ballot. Forget Bitcoin for a second and just think about really what they're saying. Do we or don't we have the right to save our own wealth, our own private property in whatever we choose? That's what's at the ballot. And hopefully, my hope is that people can sort of put the political ideology behind and also the Bitcoin issue and just look at the greater, bigger thing, right? Do we have the right to store our wealth? Now, unfortunately, Michelle, back to being a debt-based monetary system, we aren't really allowed to own anything in a debt-based monetary system. So the money in the bank legally is not your money. That money is owed to you. Your stocks that you think you own, your Apple, Google, Tesla, you don't actually own those. Legally, your broker owes them to you. Your house that you've paid off, you don't really own that. You have to pay monthly to the county assessor or they take that from you. And so Bitcoin is sort of that last thing that we can own. And I think that's part of why it's the attack vector. But it really comes down to freedom of choice. You may think Bitcoin is the stupidest thing in the world, and that's perfectly fine. But why would you make it illegal for me to want to own it?
Right.
I don't expect to see the world come together in a 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement type scenario where the entire world gets together and agrees on anything. I don't see that. So what I look at the world as a pendulum that swings back and forth on a 250-year time frame towards more centralization and back to decentralization. I talk about this quite often on my shows, and I see that the pendulum sort of started peaking out around 2016. We can see when Trump was elected, when Brexit happened, and the pendulum has started to swing back, and we can see that happening right now. So, with Russia and China, we're never getting on the same page with them, with the BRICS nations, et cetera. And so rather than the whole world coming together and announcing this is the next reserve currency of the world, I just don't see that happening. What I see happening is individual nations start moving towards things that work in their self-interest. So, for example, we can already see this through China and the BRICS, and now doing global trade through the yuan. Now these nations are basically going back to like a gold reserve. Right? I'm sure Andy Schekman has probably filled you in on this quite often. But what we can see is that Saudi Arabia, for example, is trading oil now in yuan with China. But instead of recycling their profits back into yuan, they don't want to hold those. They don't want to buy U.S. treasuries either. They're putting them into gold now. Okay, that's fine. But then we have nations like El Salvador that are putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And now at this historic Nashville event, we had both two of three presidential candidates, RFK Jr., as well as Trump, and Senator Cynthia Lummis, I want to bring her up as well, say that they want to put Bitcoin on the U.S. strategic reserve balance sheet. And so we're starting to see different nations doing different things, no different than we've seen in the past. For example, when the world in the 1800s moved from a silver standard to a gold standard. And so I think the future is decentralized. Different countries will do different things, but not one single one. And you asked about the timeline. I'll finish with that. This is happening right now. El Salvador moved first, and it was sort of this bottom-up movement. But if the U.S. moves on this, and let's just, what is the odds of that? Well, I believe, I haven't looked in the last couple of days, but Trump is at least a 60 to 65% favorite to win right now in the betting markets. I look at those, not the polls. So there's about a 65% chance of Trump winning. RFK has like less than 1%. But if Trump or RFK were to win, they have both laid out a strategic reserve asset plan for Bitcoin. And I believe they would both do that. I don't believe it was lip service. Cynthia Lummis already submitted the bill. So I believe that would happen. So there's about a 65% chance of that happening. Now, if that happens, if the U.S. moves, every other nation will then move after that. So over the time frame, I think it happens in the next 6 years, we start to see this big shift happening. Obviously, yes, if you could print money, like why wouldn't you do that?
Well,
and the reason why
that's
is...
what we're doing, right? That's what the government's doing.
Theoretically, what we could do, I mean, they want to take, and this is a point that we should hit on, I'll put a pin in it, we can come back to it, but they want to take the 200,000 plus Bitcoin that are already sort of in the government's books on the Department of Justice and move it over to the Treasury. Now, we'll put a pin in this, but Kamala Harris, who was invited to come to the Bitcoin conference and denied it, but then put out a press release saying that it was time for a reset with the crypto industry. We had, I think it was 16 high-ranking DNC members wrote a letter to the Harris campaign saying, hey, we need to fix this. Like, we're going to lose big time. So she says we need to have a reset. Well, as soon as the announcement of RFK and Trump come out and Lummis saying that we want to move that 200,000 over, what does the Harris regime do? Looks like they're starting to sell off all the Bitcoin. Let's just remove that talking point. And the reason why I wanted to bring that up, and we can dig deeper into that, is because you asked, why wouldn't we just print the money to do this? And the reason why is because the party, the administration that's in power right now, is doing everything in their power to shut it down and end it. So why would they want to buy something that they're trying to get rid of? Now, to your point, if Trump or RFK gets in, why wouldn't they print money? Well, they would, and they both announced it, and they both laid out a strategic plan as well as the amounts and the exact mechanism of how that would work.
Mark Moss believes that Michael Saylor's Bitcoin forecast might actually be too conservative. By analyzing Bitcoin's performance in comparison to the S&P 500 and its sensitivity to liquidity shifts, Moss argues that Bitcoin's growth could significantly outpace the S&P 500, potentially leading to even higher prices than Saylor anticipates. Moss explains that when you break down the numbers and factor in future economic conditions, the idea of Bitcoin reaching these levels isn't as improbable as it might seem. He also suggests that by 2045, the prices of everyday items like houses and gas could see dramatic increases, further highlighting the potential rise in Bitcoin's value. For more Daily Dose Crypto news, check out these two awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.